Frankenstein versus Shin Godzilla. Whoever wins, we lose. Didn't see you coming in and setting up a camera and starting recording. Mothra? Hello and welcome to Featured Creatures, where we look at several movies featuring one iconic monster. Now the last time I did one of these, things kind of got a little bit too big. Too many Jekyll and Hyde films. 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 So I wanted something less tasking this time, so we're looking at kaiju movies, one of my favourite things. Could you tell? Specifically, I've chosen to look at Mothra. Now, I chose Mothra for a few reasons. Firstly, I'm a feminist and I feel I ought to give the lady monsters their representation. Secondly, at 14 big screen outings, Mothra is in just the right amount of films to make a decent length of video without it being an overwhelming amount for me to sit through. Too many Jekyll and Hyde films. And thirdly, and most importantly, she has films other than her ones alongside Godzilla, so there'll be at least some variety to this. I hope. So, without further ado, but with apologies for my attempts to pronounce Japanese words, let's get into this. In 1961, kaiju tokusatsu films were rising to prominence in Japan, following on from the successes of the likes of the first two Godzilla films, Rodan and Varan. Toho Studios, the ones responsible for all these films, was still looking for new monsters to add to their roster, and so we got Mothra. But where does she come from? I'm always curious about how people come up with kaiju, and usually I don't know. But Mothra, I can tell you exactly where she came from. A book. An actual honest-to-goodness book. The Luminous Fairies in Mothra was a serialised novel, released in weekly as high, and I figured I'd see if I could track it down, and after a bit of googling and looking at Wikizilla, I found it on the American Amazon Marketplace, and how much? The condition's only acceptable. So I guess I'm not getting the book. Can't read Japanese anyway. But yeah, the book was collected in January 1961, and the film was released in June. Meaning they wrote the script, filmed and edited the movie in only 5 months. Man, the Japanese get it done. Mothra, or Mothra in English, sees a group of scientists going to the irradiated infant island after learning of the natives mysteriously free of the effects of radiation poisoning. Once there, they find 2 doll-sized fairies known as the Shobijin, or Little Beauties. They are captured by a member of the expedition who puts them into show business, in what has to be the least interesting stage show of all time. Seriously, how can anyone in the auditorium even see the Shobijin? But the song they sing on stage soon awakens the goddess of their island, the almighty Mothra. Now they have to try and return the Shobijin to the monster before it's too late. Mothra begins her life in a larval stage. Like this, she can swim across the ocean at great speeds, wreck her way through buildings and spray silk. But after she is repeatedly attacked by the military, she makes a cocoon around herself and metamorphoses into a moth form, though in all honesty she looks more like a butterfly. In this stage, she can make strong winds by flapping her wings, and she can sprinkle, I guess it's pollen, or magic dust? I don't know, but it sprinkles. Mothra is kind of rare amongst the Toho kaiju. Not just because she's identified as female, which, we've got a bit of a sausage fest here, let's be honest. But no, Mothra is unique because she's never really villainous. Godzilla started as bad guy. Rodan, bad guy. King Ghidorah, bad guy. But Mothra? Inherently good. Sure, she wrecks the city in the first outing, but only to save the Shobijin. She is good. This is a very entertaining kaiju movie. The plot is simple and fun, the human characters are all enjoyable, the Shobijin are done fairly convincingly all things considered, and Mothra makes for a great monster. But the best thing about this movie? It has a song! Come on everyone, you know the words. Mosuraya, Mosura, Dongan kasakuyan indomu, Urusotoya do hanba muyan, Randa banhun radan, Tonjun kanra, kasakuyan, Mosuraya, Mosura. Wait, you don't know the words to the Mothra song? Then I guess we'll move on. In 1964, Toho did the most sensible thing they could possibly have done with Mothra. Make her fight their most popular monster, Godzilla. And it's not like I need to introduce him to you at this point. But what I haven't discussed in my show yet is that Godzilla went through different distinct periods. The first is known as the Showa era, named for the period of Japanese history they were produced in, the country being under the rule of Emperor Hirohito, who would posthumously be known as Emperor Showa. The Showa era runs from the original 1954 Gojira to Mecha Gojira no Gakushu in 1975. While this started out more serious, it quickly got very silly and fun, and is definitely the most light-hearted part of kaiju history. So Mothra Tai Gojira, or Mothra vs Godzilla, was still pretty early into that period, being only the fourth film in the Godzilla series. Here we see Mothra's egg wash up in Japan, where an evil corporation takes ownership of it. The Shobijin turn up to try and convince them to give it back, but they're unwilling because of all the profit they can make. Somehow. But before too long, Godzilla rises out of the ground and starts doing his thing, i.e. wrecking pagodas. The human heroes head to Infinite Island and convince Mothra to come help. So she fights Godzilla, but the ultimate tragedy happens. Mothra dies, giving the last of her life energy to the egg, which hatches into two larvae. So there are two Mothras now. They take out Godzilla with their silk. There's not a lot new added to Mothra here, but it does everything you would want Mothra vs Godzilla to do. Mothra and Godzilla fight and it's really cool. They use the abilities of the two monsters to great effect, really delivering the kaiju action. Prepare for me to say variations of this same thing for the rest of the video. Released in the same year was Sandai Kaiju Chikyusaido no Kessen, or Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Here we see a meteorite crash landing to Earth, which turns out to contain the giant three-headed dragon monster King Ghidorah. Meanwhile, Godzilla and giant pterodactyl Rodan awaken and begin fighting. So the human characters of the movie ask the Shobijin, who are in Japan making a public appearance for some reason, to summon Mothra to help them. Here, Mothra is still a larva, but there's only one of her, even though in the last movie there were two. I'm going to assume that she ate her sister for survival. The monsters don't show up until the later stages of the film, the rest being concerned with some human stuff, but when they do it's great. Mothra has to convince Godzilla and Rodan to stop fighting and take out Ghidorah. So they're talking and the Shobijin are translating, which leads to this excellent moment in the dub.
Oh, Godzilla, what terrible language!
And that gag's not in the Japanese version. Only America got foul-mouthed Godzilla in this movie. Mothra never gets to be in her moth form in this one, only a larva. But even so, she's still enough of a badass to try and take on Ghidorah on her own. It doesn't end well. But once she teams up with Godzilla and Rodan, they get it done, and the fighting is super fun. I like the idea of her being the one to bring them together and turn evil monsters to good, because she was the only one who started out as inherently good anyway, so it makes sense that she is the one to bring about the change. Mothra next appeared in 1966 in Gojira Ebara Mothra Nankai no Daiketo, or Ebara, Horror of the Deep, or Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. Mothra is hardly in this one, so it'll be pretty easy for us to get through it. Basically, the whole plot takes place on this deserted island, and Mothra shows up at the end to rescue all the humans, spending the rest of the movie just kind of waiting around on Infinite Island. The movie is fun enough, but given that Mothra is basically irrelevant to the plot, I think we'd best move along. Next up, we have the 1968 film Kaiju Soshingeki, or Destroy All Monsters. This was designed as a potential final film for the Godzilla series, and it is the mother of all blowouts you might expect. In the distant future of 1999, all the kaiju have been captured on an island called Monsterland. Naturally, Mothra is amongst them, this time appearing as a larva again. I guess there's probably been a few generations of Mothra between the films. She's used very early on to show how to keep all the monsters on the island, reacting to some gas. Then we see her attacking Beijing and Tokyo while under the control of evil aliens. It's actually pretty rare to see Mothra partaking in this kind of wanton destruction that you get from most other kaiju, and so that's pretty cool. She also gets to help out in the final fight against King Ghidorah, which is nothing but satisfying. So I'd say that for all she may be used a bit sparingly in this film, she's at least used quite well. And that's the last time that Mothra appeared in the Showa era of Godzilla films. She was conspicuously absent from that point until we get into the Heisei period. Named for the current period in Japan with the Emperor Akihito, starting with his ascension to the Chrysanthemum throne in 1989. In the Godzilla films it refers to any film from Gojira in 1984 to Gojira Tai Destroyer in 1995. This point in the series saw the films head back to the more serious tone of the earliest kaiju films, by pretending that every film between 1954 and 1984 never happened. So in this version of the story, Mothra has never been discovered yet, and wouldn't be until 1992, with the film Godzilla Mothra, or Godzilla vs. Mothra, or Godzilla and Mothra Battle for Earth. Here we essentially get a condensed version of the plot of the original Mothra, with a group of adventurers coming across her egg on Infant Island and meeting the Shobijin, though here they're renamed the Cosmos. But I prefer the sound of Shobijin, so I'm sticking with that. A corporation kidnaps the Shobijin and intends to use them for some kind of nefarious purpose, proving once again that capitalism is the true villain. Mothra is summoned to save them via a new recording of the Mothra song, which is pretty nice. Then, once the Shobijin are safe, Mothra goes into a cocoon and gets ready for the final fight against Godzilla. But Godzilla isn't her only enemy in this film. We also have a brand new monster, Batra. Batra is an evil mirror to Mothra. He starts in a larval form and transforms into a flying version. He has a pretty cool design, with the red and gold really popping against the black. I love the idea of giving her an enemy all her own, and I really wish there was more of him, but sadly this is his only film appearance to date. The updated Mothra puppets are pretty great. You can tell there were much higher production values across the board, though it is maybe a little weird that Mothra is so fuzzy, and her legs don't move here when they used to in the earlier films, but that feels minor when it looks so good otherwise. Mothra and Batra eventually end up teaming up to take out Godzilla, and in the process Batra dies. Hence no more appearances, I guess. But yeah, this is a fun movie, and it was successful. To date, it is still the highest grossing Japanese-made Godzilla film. However, it was nearly quite different. The original plan was a solo Mothra adventure, but that was shot down in favour of another Godzilla film. And we nearly got to see Mecha Mothra, which probably would have been terrible, so I'm glad that never happened. Up next is 1994's Gojira Tai Space Gojira, or Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. Sadly, Mothra barely features in this one, but following the events of the last movie she went to space, carrying some of Godzilla's cells with her. These got pulled through a black hole and evolved into Space Godzilla, because science is something that happens to other people, I guess. Beyond that, she's only in the movie to occasionally send psychic messages to this lady, which gives the Shobijin an appearance. Beyond that, she's not really featured. Meaning that, though it's a fun movie with plenty of cool kaiju action, we can skip this one for the next phase. So in 1996, it was decided that Mothra should once again have her own solo film, with Mothra, or Rebirth of Mothra. And I'll be honest, this one is one of the main reasons I decided to do this video, because I'd never seen this film or its sequels before, and I really wanted to check them out and talk about them. Here, a logging company unknowingly removes a magic seal holding in the evil fairy Belvira, who soon unleashes the monster Desghidorah on the world. It's now up to Mothra and the Shobijin to save the day. Mothra in this movie gains some new abilities. For one, she can unleash a smaller version of herself called Fairy that the Shobijin ride around on. She can also shoot lasers now, which might have come in handy all those times you were fighting Godzilla. The larval stage has a laser too, and its silk has a cool rainbow effect which I like. And as the film gets to about the last 15 minutes, we get the titular rebirth. The larva becomes Shin Mothra, or Mothra Leo, who has more colourful wings and green eyes. But the biggest change? Mothra Leo is a guy. Yes, a male Mothra, thereby ruining one of my favourite parts about the character.
Oh well. He's still cool.
He flies faster than his mother and can split himself into loads of tiny energy moths. He kicks Desghidorah's arse and then some. This is quite an entertaining film. For all that it's pretty light on plot, it makes up for it with some excellent kaiju action. Desghidorah makes for a brilliant foe, being essentially a reskinned King Ghidorah but with arms, and the fight scenes against him are really satisfying to watch. Having an evil counterpart with the Shobijin is a nice touch, much as I can only really think of one thing while watching her.
After 10,000 years, I'm free! It's time to conquer Earth!
I mean, right?
In this movie, the Shobijin actually have individual names, Lorna and Mol, and instead of Shobijin or Cosmos, they're referred to as the Elias. But I still prefer Shobijin, and I'm too deep into this to change now. The sequel, Mothra Tsukaite no Daikasen, or Mothra 2, The Battle Under the Deep Sea, or Mothra Rebirth 2, is where things start to get a little weird.
I mean, I know weird is a relative term when we're talking about the giant moth movies, but trust me, we'll get there.
The plot of this movie is about a giant dragon monster called Dagara, who is attacking the world with a bunch of tiny starfish monsters. Meanwhile, these kids find a magical puffball with piss that can heal people's wounds. Yes, really. They do a POV shot from one of the people getting peed on and everything, and find themselves in an ancient temple for reasons. Then the second half of the movie is just them getting into shenanigans in the temple, while Mothra Leo fights Dagara outside. Mothra Leo gets severely hurt in the fight and nearly dies, until the magic puffball, who, don't forget, the movie has established can magically heal people with its piss, heals Mothra by flying up into the air and well... essentially the day is saved by a golden shower is what I'm saying.
I told you it was weird.
So, Mothra Leo is once again reborn into what is often referred to as Rainbow Mothra. He looks pretty fabulous and... wait, rainbow? He looks pretty awesome and seems more powerful once again. Then he changes again into Aqua Mothra. He's like a fish moth thing. Then he splits up into a bunch of mini fish moth things and destroys Daggera from the inside. This is less interesting than the first film. The monster fights are still engaging, but the plot isn't very compelling. Mothra Leo's levelling up into a fish is a bit convenient, and the Golden Shower solution is just off-putting. The third film in the Rebirth trilogy is Mothra Suri King Ghidorah Raishu, or Mothra 3, Invasion of King Ghidorah, or Rebirth of Mothra 3. Here, King Ghidorah invades and starts absorbing children into this weird testicle dome, and Mothra must once again save the day by travelling back in time. Here we have Rainbow Mothra, and she's inexplicably female again. She doesn't stand much of a chance against Ghidorah until she goes back in time. Then she throws him into a goddamn volcano. Though, once again she gets mortally wounded, and these prehistoric Mothra larvae make her a cocoon, which she waits in for 130 million years, coming back to fight Ghidorah in the present, which means she gets reborn again, and her wings are even more fabulously rainbow than ever. And she looks kind of metallic. It's pretty cool looking, but a bit angry for my tastes. Fortunately, she turns nice and fuzzy again at the end, so it's all good. One of the most interesting aspects of this film is that the Shobijin end up separated. Lorna gets turned to evil by Ghidorah, and Mol has to use her powers to send Mothra back in time. This is the only time anything like this has happened with them, and it's kind of cool to see. In fact, Mol sacrifices her own life to save the world, and Lorna and Belvira have to unite to aid in the final battle. It's not exactly stellar material, but it serves its purpose well enough. This trilogy of films is definitely interesting to check out. I like all the different designs for Mothra, but kind of wish that they each had more to do. Giving the Shobijin a more active role in the stories and a dark mirror in Belvira was quite cool though, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. Overall, they're not anything I'd really revisit, but they're definitely entertaining kaiju fight films while they were there, and I think it's cool that Mothra managed to pull out of Godzilla's shadow.
That is, of course, until she got dragged right back under it.
Our next film is the third in the Godzilla Millennium series, which started with 1999's Gojira Nissen Mirai and ended with 2004's Gojira Final Ruozu. Each of these films was treated as their own separate timeline, each one following on only from the 1954 original and ignoring everything else. The first Mothra appeared in this series was in 2001's Gojira Masuru King Ghidorah Daikaiju Sokugeki, or Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All Out Attack, or the greatest title that a film has ever had ever. Here, Mothra is one of three guardian monsters, whose purpose is to save the Earth from Godzilla, the others being King Ghidorah and Baragon. So, shouldn't it be called Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah and Baragon Giant Monsters All Out Attack? Or is that too long? Mothra first appears in this movie in her larva form once again, knocking these punk kids off a boat before they can hurt this poor dog. Then she goes into a cocoon for most of the movie, only emerging when it becomes time to fight Godzilla in her full-grown moth form. Her method of attack seems to be mainly flying overhead and slightly grazing Godzilla, although she does fire a bunch of projectiles at him that I didn't know she had. She comes across as quite heroic though, taking a blast of atomic breath to save Ghidorah, and then carrying on fighting even while she's on fire. Before the end of the fight she is seemingly destroyed, but gives her soul to Ghidorah to give him strength in the final battle, because Mothra is the most noble. As a side note, it's super weird to be rooting for King Ghidorah in a film. He's usually the villain, and seeing him save the day just feels wrong. The role of hero makes more sense for Mothra. She's always been the good one, only a villain when brainwashed by aliens that one time. This doesn't really bring anything new for her, but it's a lot of fun. No Shobijin in this one though. There'd be a distraction from the fights, I suppose. The next time Mothra appeared in the Millennium series was the 2003 film Gojira Masuru Mecha Gojira Tokyo SOS, or Godzilla Tokyo SOS. And yes, they did cut Mothra's name out of the Western title. Not cool. So, you know how I said a minute ago that every film in the Millennium series was entirely its own timeline? Well, turns out this one disproves that, so I guess I'm the idiot. This is a follow-up to the previous film in the series, Gojira Tai Mecha Gojira. So, Mechagodzilla has been made out of the original 1954 Godzilla's bones, and the new Godzilla is showing up to take revenge, or something. But Mothra is there to set things right. This is the last film where Mothra is really a major player, and she does her thing just great once again. Battling Godzilla in moth form, using her magic dust attack, and we once more get to see two Mothra larvae for the first time since Mothra vs. Godzilla. They used the silk to tie up Godzilla for Mechagodzilla to take out, and it's as great as ever. What's cool here is that this movie makes direct references to the original Mothra, with this character being one of the people who landed on Infant Island originally. It was common to see Gojira being referenced like this, but for Mothra, it was something different, and I liked it. Respectful to the roots. The Shobijin are back once again, and they look cold. Was there any need to try and make them look sexy? They're meant to be magical spirits of the earth, not pin-ups.
But whatever, Mothra is still a feminist icon. Didn't have this shirt made for nothing.
It's pretty cool to see Mothra appearing alongside Mechagodzilla. This is the only time that particular pairing was the headline monsters alongside Godzilla. It's a premise that they maybe could have done more with, like there's the potential of a nature versus technology angle that fits in nicely with the anti-corporate pro-environment message of Mothra, but sadly nothing really comes from it. After this, we only really have one more movie to talk about. And in that, Mothra is only a small supporting role against many, many monsters. The last film in the Millennium series, 2004's Gojira Finaru Wazu, or Godzilla Final Wars. This was made for Godzilla's 50th anniversary, and plays out a similar plot to Destroy All Monsters, with Godzilla fighting against all the other monsters who are being controlled by aliens. But unlike Destroy All Monsters, this one is just bad. Really obnoxious with terrible early 2000s we wish we were the Matrix filmmaking techniques. For her part, Mothra doesn't even show up until the last 40 minutes. Then she helps Godzilla out in his fight against Gigan and Monster X, ultimately sacrificing herself in a blaze of fire. It's honestly a fairly underwhelming end for her, and it's a shame because her other appearances in the Millennium series have been quite good, but this just feels like a disservice to the character thrown in out of necessity. Even in terms of look, there was a lot of CGI used in making her in this one, and it looks awful compared to the practical shots. I am really not a fan of this film. The Shobijin also appear briefly, but don't really contribute anything other than giving the humans this magical MacGuffin.
So ends the Millennium series, and Mothra's final appearance to date.
Outside of these films, Mothra would also appear in the Godzilla video games, and a TV show called Godzilla Island, but I really just wanted to keep this centered around the movies. But the good news is that Mothra will be appearing again. We got to see a cave painting of her in the after-credit scene of Kong Skull Island, teasing her upcoming appearance in Godzilla King of the Monsters in 2019, where she'll once more go up alongside Godzilla, Rodan and King Ghidorah, just like the good old days. So, that's Mothra. In her 56 years of existence, she hasn't really changed an awful lot, but that's okay, because given the genre of movie she appears in, there's not a lot to change. She exists largely as a supporting player to the more popular Godzilla, appearing both as friend and foe, but still got the opportunity to do her own thing, which is more than can be said of most of the other kaiju in the series.
So, until next time, this has been Featured Creatures.
Mothra, yeah, Mothra. Dongakasakuya, Indomu. Lusto willado, hamba hamba muyang. Tanda panguradan, sonju kalla. Kasakuya.
Oh, Godzilla, what terrible language!
Two Billy Jekyll and Hyde films.